Good afternoon and welcome to our statewide model program of study in manufacturing and engineering. We're so excited that you have decided to join us on today. So here are some things that we're going to discuss throughout our presentation. We're going to have a welcome from our team at EdSystems and also our colleague at ICCB. We're going to give you all a background on our model program of study guides, including how they align with various policies and also the role of our advisory committees. We're going to move forward and talk about our mapping process for our guides. And then we're going to take a deep dive into the particular guide of manufacturing and engineering. We're most excited today because we have Rock Valley College on the line, and they're going to share some of the great work that they are doing within their particular program. Lastly, we're going to wrap it up with some next stops and some feedback. A couple of quick notes. We highly encourage the chat box. So if you have any questions, feel free to use the Q&A function or drop the question in the chat box as we go along. Again, this webinar is recorded and we're going to add the slide deck in the chat for your review. Also, we want to get to know you too. So we're going to do some introductions here, but if you could go ahead and drop who you are, right? Like your name and the organization that you represent, that would be amazing. I'm going to turn it over to my colleague, Janelle, to go ahead and give us a welcome.
Thank you. So good afternoon. I'm Janelle Washington, Director for Career and Technical Education at the Illinois Community College Board. And on behalf of ICCB, I'd like to welcome you to the third webinar in the Illinois Model Programs of Study Guides webinar series. Again, today's focus is manufacturing and engineering. As always, I'd like to express my sincerest gratitude to EdSystems for their continued partnership and their great facilitation of this work around programs of study, including these awesome webinars that offer a deep dive into each of the guides. So I'd encourage you to reach out to EdSystems with any questions that you have about the model programs of study guides and how they can be used in program and study development and improvement at your colleges. Additionally, EdSystems has a wealth of other great resources and other professional development opportunities. And so I'd encourage you, if you haven't already, to take a look at their website and use these resources. With that, again, welcome. Thank you for joining us today. Thank you, EdSystems, and I will turn it over so we can get started.
Janelle, thank you so much for your kind words. We are so thrilled to have you as a partner to walk alongside of us as we complete this work. My name is Megan Mitchell and I'm the Pathway Manager. And so I'm going to turn it over to my colleagues at EdSystems to go ahead and unmute yourself and introduce yourselves as well.
Hi, everyone. I'm Juan Jose Gonzalez. I'm the Pathways Director for Education Systems Center.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm John Furr. I'm the Executive Director at Education Systems Center.
Thank you. So, as you all know, the mission at EdSystems is to shape and strengthen education and workforce systems to advance racial equity and to prepare more young people for productive careers and lives in the global economy. And so we do that work through college and career pathways, to bridges to post-secondary education, and also through data impact and leadership. And so as we dive into our presentation, I want to go ahead and pass it over to my colleague, Juan Jose.
Hi, everyone. So thank you very much, Megan. So a little bit of background on why we've developed these model programs of study guides. The primary purposes of these guides are pretty much centrally to kind of help local communities, local collaborations of communities adopt programs of study in the high school and the post-secondary space in alignment with the post-secondary, the Perkins 5 plan, or kind of the career and technical education funding requirements. As a part of these kind of statewide programs of study, a big goal and a big overarching kind of desire was to identify priority dual credit and early college courses that are foundational to an industry sector and to an industry area, and that would also kind of link a program of study from a secondary to and through a post-secondary space, and kind of have them be more cohesive and straightforward. One of the other goals in our kind of program study creation was to define competencies, not only for each industry sector or kind of each programs of study, but within certain courses that could be common across the industry, common across the educational institutions in our state. And we also wanted to identify points of entry for employers to kind of support their coursework or support the development of the guides. Next slide, please. So the intended audiences of these programs of study guides are obviously high school faculty working on pathways, working on their own kind of high school level programs of study, and partnering with their community college faculty and staff, academic deans, department heads, early college liaisons, but also kind of a work-based learning facilitators and things of that nature. And obviously as well, and I see many of you are joining, education for employment system directors are also kind of an intended audience who are bringing all those folks together as well. Today, we're having a presentation on manufacturing and engineering. We have subsequent kind of presentations in information technology in January. And in February, we're going to be kind of doing our next round of guides that we did and finished in 2021, and we'll start with agriculture, food, and natural resources. So if you're interested in joining those topics or have colleagues that you're kind of in your educational institutions, please make sure to invite them as well. So this slide here represents kind of EdSystems and kind of a belief in kind of a coalescing state pathways model that is happening in our state. On the far left-hand side, we definitely believe, and the state kind of is generally promoting this notion of a pathway that has some individual participant or student planning, some high focus on career focused instruction or career focused coursework, robust work-based learning, and also attention paid to core academic subject areas such as math and English, but also sometimes science and social science. And as I mentioned before, the desire is to make a pathways model or a pathways framework that starts in secondary and goes to and through post-secondary, and that these two educational structures are not siloed, separate from each other, right? They should be building on each other, with young people being able to get low-skilled or early-skilled occupations, semi-skilled occupations as they progress, leading to middle-skilled occupations, degrees, stackable credentials, and eventually kind of earning and able to achieve advanced skills and high labor market outcomes, right? Sometimes that means a bachelor's degree and a bachelor's of science, but not always. But the idea is still kind of high credential attainment and high labor market participation. One thing that we've been definitely emphasizing in our work is this kind of the state's new college career pathway endorsement, which is a unique understanding of what a pathway is and kind of what are the requirements to complete that. A student would graduate high school with this new college career pathway endorsement marked on their transcript, similar to like the state seal by literacy, and somewhat comparable maybe to like a post-secondary degree minor or things of that nature, right? It indicates multiple years of pathway experience and a high level of pathway expertise. What you're seeing here on your screen is kind of the requirements for a student to earn the college career pathway endorsement. It's broken down by the subject areas or the kind of the categories of a pathway: individual planning, work-based learning, career focused instruction, and academic readiness. Academic readiness is really paying attention to the kind of the college level readiness in math and English. I bring these up because on the right-hand bottom, I think with one click, you'll see with the bottom right of your screen, the career focused instruction and the academic readiness are very influential and central kind of to the model program of study guide creation, right? We made sure to create programs of study that align generally to kind of the career focus and academic readiness requirements of the pathway endorsement as a good benchmark for what students should be accomplishing in terms of early college credit and math and English remediation avoidance. But also, there's also a larger alignment that we hope to accomplish with these programs of study, right? We're trying to align to various kind of statewide policy and legislative institutional kind of arrangements, such as the Post-Secondary and Workforce Readiness Act with passed in 2016. Obviously, the new reauthorization of Perkins 5 and the Career Technical Education. We're paying heavy attention to the Dual Credit Quality Act and the Model Partnership Agreement. We're also really mindful of kind of the state's ESSA plan and the College and Career Readiness Indicator. And we're trying to really not create like conflict, but trying to synergize all these kind of policy frameworks in the creation of our programs of study guide, so that it's kind of like implementation really touches base in all of these sectors as well. And what we'd like to say is that anyone who completes a program of study or college career pathway endorsement is really kind of set up for success in the policy space and college and career life ready, right? The reason why that we believe that is a student who does a program of study or a pathway endorsement has a certain set of foundational skills on the bottom right of your screen for all careers. They have some work-based learning, some general employability, and some project-based learning and teamwork experience. So that's going to be helpful for all their kind of professional experiences. They're going to be heavily accelerated towards a certain career area. So they're going to have multiple years of coursework within a certain industry sector. Some of that coursework is going to have high rigor with being able to accomplish for early college credit, dual credit, or AP. And they're going to be kind of beyond the traditional high school CTE courses as well, and potentially have students earning industry credentials and complementary general education courses. And last but not least, any student who kind of engages in a program study as we've outlined, or the college career pathway endorsement as we align to, is going to be by definition academically ready for college, right? They're going to have success in college because they're going to place into college level math and English, and also have some early college credit under their belt that will hopefully kind of strengthen their resolve and confidence at the post-secondary space. What you're seeing here on your screen are the guides that we have created over the last 2 years in coordination with the Illinois Community College Board, the Illinois State Board of Education, many education for employment educators, high school faculty, kind of community college faculty, and in many cases also employer kind of associations or employer partners kind of advising in some of our guides, right? There's 8 guides. Some we made in 2020 on the left hand of your screen, and some we've made in 2021, most recently, that we'll start kind of presenting on starting in February of 2022. You can access, for each guide, there's a singular one-page diagram that you can access that's very printable and shareable, but there's also like a 20-page guide explaining our reasoning, decision points, kind of advice of the advisory committee, and kind of some deliberations that we had. And you get to see who made up that advisory committee as well. All those kind of resources and guides are at the link at the bottom left of your screen, which if you have the slide deck, you can link to by clicking there as well. I want to kind of stay a little bit on the role of this advisory committee for our guides, right? We obviously at Education Systems Center, in partnership with ISB and ICCB, did some kind of very desk level research on labor market trends statewide, what credentials are happening in many community colleges and kind of post-secondary institutions. And that desk analysis and this research was really vetted by our advisory committee. They altered or made recommendations to alter that desk research, and they really informed key decision points in our creation of our programs of study, right? They informed the Pathways Map approach, helped us really select some of the early college courses that we wanted to emphasize in our guide, and they really robustly kind of created our key competencies for some of the kind of courses and skills that we were identifying in our programs of study. Each kind of advisory committee made up around 15 to 25 people, varied by industry sector. So we're very happy with those advisory committee, and they're always listed in the back of our guide as a reference for you all there as well. Thank you very much.
All right, now we're going to go ahead and talk about our mapping process. And so what you see are like the 5 key elements that were a part of how we map to our program of study guides. This process took about 6 months, and it entailed us doing an extensive desk research, and then also making tons of edits and changes, then also having our guides available for like public comments, and also infusing those updates into our guides as well. And so in this moment, what we're going to do is we're going to focus on this particular section of our guide in terms of how we identified high priority occupations and determined promising credentials, and also how we mapped to stackable degrees and certificates. And so high priority occupation. And so one thing that we used was the labor market data and the MIT living wage calculator for the state of Illinois as a huge reference. And so we were able to look at the potential careers that earn a living wage of 1 adult and 1 child. And so we use that data to kind of help us verify high priority occupations. And then in terms of promising credential, we define that as like any degree or certification that immediately prepares an individual for entry into a particular high priority occupation. Again, we focus on occupations that had parallel programs within community colleges, and we research credentials that were stackable towards various academic programs. And so right here is literally a snapshot of what this looks like. And so as you can see, there are various examples of careers. There are various medium wage salaries here. And then we ask our question, is it a living wage? Is there potential growth in the state? We list the education, the entry level of education, and also annual job openings within that particular career. And so as you can see, we have some dots here. And so the green dots kind of indicate like, yes, these are indeed potential careers that should be highly prioritized. And then the yellow careers were like, we need to have more discussion around those particular occupations. And then those who have no dots were not benchmarked to. And so here you'll see all of the various programs that link to a particular industry or an occupation. And so some of these programs were stackable to bachelor degrees, and then some of these programs may have had like an industry credential where a student could simply go into the workforce with that particular certification. And so just a special note is that we paid attention to the Illinois State Board of Education program of study matrices for secondary districts to no overlap and also collaboration. Next, we're going to talk about how we identify strategic community college courses. And so what we did is we took a deep dive into the course requirement for each program within various community colleges throughout the state. We researched courses that appeared most frequently, courses that were accessible for dual credit or dual enrollment, and also accessible in terms of like high school teachers having access to teach the course as a dual credit course or as an adjunct faculty within a particular community college. We also researched courses that were that were able to transfer or had a high portability rate through Illinois Articulation Agreement, or also through other partnerships that maybe a community college had with a particular university within their particular area. Lastly, one thing that we did was we highlighted which course led to an industry credential. So like, for example, in the world of culinary, there's a course titled Food Sanitation that can lead to a Serve Safe Food Protection Manager certificate. And here, this is like another deeper snapshot of what that process looked like. And so you see a list of courses here, and you see a list of tallies that we kind of earmark to, depending on different variables for that particular course. And so you see like the name of the course, various community colleges, if the course had prerequisites, if the course was like a door opener to another course, etc. And then this is just a bigger snapshot of that same document. And so in this moment, we're going to go ahead and talk about how we map to secondary and post-secondary sequence. And so one thing that we wanted to recommend is that students take college courses early, as early in their career as possible, and that we recommend that a student graduates with at least 6 credit hours of career focused hours by graduation. Another thing that's important is that we want to think about the possibility of unique opportunities, such as like work-based learning or a capstone course. And then also the delivery method of the course. With the pandemic, things have changed, right? More courses are available online, which is great for access. And then we recommend sequence and general education subjects, including early college and AP supplements. Lastly, we're going to talk about how we define related technical competencies. So we chose courses that were highly strategic in our program of study sequence, but were not portable or transferable in the Illinois Articulation Agreements. And so we look we looked at credentials that were associated with each course. And then we took that information and saw which courses could be accessed by early credits. And then lastly, we gathered as much information we can about that particular course, and that include like syllabi information from various institutions, including high school district, community colleges, and some four-year institutions. We took that and we gathered all the commonalities, particularly within the learning outcomes and objectives, and we combined them into a set of competencies that you see in the guides as well. And so next, I'm going to pass it over to my colleague, John Furr, to really take a deep dive into the manufacturing and engineering guide itself.
Thanks, Megan. It's a pleasure to be able to speak with you all this afternoon. Each of us on the EdSystems team took a lead for a different guide, and I had the pleasure of kind of serving as our lead for the manufacturing and engineering guide. So we're going to dive into each component of this guide as you kind of pull this up and look at it separately. The way that you generally read these is you kind of start with the process as Megan laid out, starting in the bottom right-hand area, looking at those occupations, again, which we've selected for alignment to, then back mapping that through the promising credentials, the post-secondary options is just above that, and then kind of moving that back to the high school sequence, so both those career-focused courses and those gen ed courses and the related work-based learning. So that's the way that I'm going to talk about it here, kind of again, starting back in that bottom right-hand corner and diving into some of the occupational analysis that we did within this space. So as we go to the next slide. So this is the table that was our starting point, looking at the labor market information for jobs within this area. And there was a couple of key factors, as Megan had mentioned, that we were looking at. So first of all, do these occupations, when we're looking at the median wage for the occupations, are they paying above that living wage threshold? And you can see that for the most part, jobs within this sector that we were analyzing generally did. There were a few that were just below that line in terms of welders and machinists. But for welders, we know in many parts of the state that actually those jobs are meeting those more regional thresholds for the living wage criteria. And so decided to include those. For machinists. Those roles can then stack into many of those higher paying careers that are shown on this slide as well. And when you begin to look at the machinist roles, you can see, it's really referring to more the operator positions. But as students are able to progress along that pathways and move into those programmer roles that are just behind it, you can see that wage jump up to that $25 an hour threshold. And also, as you begin to move into roles like industrial machinery mechanics as well, those who are working on the operations and maintenance issues on the shop floors, again, that also begins to lead to those higher wage thresholds. We also wanted to make sure within our model generally that we were focused on durable and non-durable goods. So not just looking at sparks and slivers, as some people talk about with the metalworking operations, but thinking about all the processes around chemical production and food production and all those other types of roles which require those manufacturing skill sets. So you see roles like process technology that are addressed within the program area as well. And when you begin to look at this, some of the higher paying roles are on that last line. So as we begin to think of the automation of this industry area generally, you can see that's reflected in the labor market wages for those technologists, the robotics technicians, again, making those higher thresholds. And of course, for the engineering related roles as well, higher paying and requiring more from the educational standpoint for those roles. So as we go on to the next slide, you can see those occupational categories that I just talked about are reflected in the post-secondary pathways that we began to map out for this field. Again, starting with the welding pathway with the ability to move into welding certificates and on to AAS degrees as well if needed, but we know that many of the job opportunities in welding you can obtain through that certification and starting out within that field. From the machining and production arena, having the ability again as well to get some of those entry-level jobs with certificates, but also having the opportunity to move on to those AAS degrees within that field. And also for many programs across the state, there's the ability to carry that on through as needed as someone moves along their career pathway onto those Bachelor's of Science degrees, those four-year degree opportunities. And that includes programs at SIU, at NIU, at Governor State, and other parts of the state, again, that can stack in directly to those AAS degrees in many of these fields. And then the next category down, again, looking at those careers we're just talking about where there's many job openings and great paying opportunities, and industrial maintenance and process operations, which gets into that chemical processing, those non-durable processes, and that last category for the engineering and automation areas. For the engineering related roles, knowing that we've referred to those as guided transfer pathways, because for the individuals that are wanting to go into the engineering field, being able to support them to move through the AES degrees onto this Bachelor's of Science degrees that they'll need for the entry-level occupations. So with those post-secondary pathways, as we take that down to the next stage, the analysis of those pathway options really informed the courses that were selected as part of the career-focused instructional sequence. And for all the model programs with study guides, I know for those of you that have been using them for various work locally or looked at them for other sectors, we kind of break up the high school course sequence into these three big chunks. So starting with the orientation or introduction courses offered at either grades 9 or 10, depending on kind of how your local pathways might be structured. Then moving into those skill development courses, which build on that, which can be offered typically anywhere from sophomore year for students that might be entering the pathway later, all the way up to senior year. But the ideal pathway sequence would have at least 3 years of courses that can lead to that capstone opportunity, which is really supporting, again, that student interest in that pathway area and preparing them on for that post-secondary transition. So what you see within this model programs of study, kind of starting at that orientation level, is a broad introductory course to various fields within the technology and engineering space. So again, this would ideally be a course that would be suitable for students who may have an interest in manufacturing or might want to go toward the engineering route or might be interested in other fields within that broader manufacturing, engineering, technology, and trades area. So having the introductory course, again, that can lay that foundation. Then moving into that skill development, and the way that we laid out the skill development area was beginning to branch there within a focus for advanced manufacturing or a focus for engineering, and being able to identify some of the coursework for either that might be appropriate based on that student interest and where they want to pursue. It's suggested that for those courses that should be offered, you can kind of see on the course coding down below, that you would ideally begin to introduce those early college credit courses within that skill development arena for this pathway. And the idea with that foundations of productions and manufacturing processes is that it's suggested in the model programs of study as being that sort of foundational skill development course, whether the student might be interested in machining or welding or other manufacturing areas, having that manufacturing foundational course that can lead into that capstone course, where either the student is building onto that for the advanced production and manufacturing course, or moving into the welding courses with the engineering pathway aligned there as well. We also have identified on this pathway area, again, the importance for this area, for all areas, that work-based learning sequence that Juan Isaiah talked about, kind of related to college and career pathway endorsement, and making sure that that is sequenced across those career-focused courses in terms of the structure for that. One other thing I want to point out, kind of depending on your local structures, these courses, as are shown here, they might be a year-long course, they may be a semester by semester course, and they certainly would oftentimes have different names, right? It might be a manufacturing 1 or manufacturing 2. You may define them as machining courses. So this isn't as much getting into the names around them as it is to the structure and the competencies I'll talk about in just a few slides. So as we go to the next slide, looking at those general education courses, there were some recommendations that were made for students interested in the manufacturing and the engineering pathways. Thinking from a science standpoint, trying to get students to those advanced physics courses, So trying to provide the opportunities for those students who are interested within those fields. And in math is the one area where there needs to be that really close analysis as you're doing that local model program of study mapping. Now, some manufacturing courses at the programs at the community college level don't require college algebra, can require more of those gen ed math requirements, but we found in the analysis that there's so many programs that do. So certainly if the college level programs are requiring that college algebra trig math course, you need to make sure that students that want to pursue that are being supported through either an early college course like the college algebra or calculus if their students are ready for that or pre-calc, or that they're supported for transitional math within the STEM pathway or a technical transitional math course that aligns directly with the community college program. So math is a really important area for your local analysis as you're thinking about your model programs to study, making sure that students are supported to move into that non-remedial math course that aligns with the math pathway for the manufacturing area. So with that, I want to take some time to dive in a little bit more deeply into the competencies that are mapped into those career-focused courses. And because, you know, my group like to overachieve than some of the other groups, we decided to map out 3 courses, but that was mostly because we really wanted to make sure that we were showing the scaffolding of the competencies that you need to think about in a manufacturing pathway, beginning from that orientation course, leading all the way through that skill development and that capstone course. So as you think about that orientation course, it's really important to think about that goal statement. And what the advisory group really said is that you want students to get excited about these pathways, right? You want them to understand what those pathways are, and you want them to know that there's a lot of different careers and opportunities within the space, within the state of Illinois that they can begin to explore. So the goal within that orientation course, again, is that students are aware of the various career pathways within this field, that they have exposure to the range of manufacturing processes, from machining to those non-durable good productions like food development, for additive manufacturing, for robotics, that they begin to have some basic exposure. You also see safety, a safety mindset that's begun to be introduced here. Safety is a constant theme throughout these competencies. And leading as well to thinking about those early courses, how do you start to build in that work-based learning sequence? So you see that there's a goal that students would begin to engage in career exploration activities virtually or in person to understand the range of local employers that are working within that space. So as you're building from that initial orientation course, you can move on to the next set of courses within the skill development and capstone. And again, these are all laid out within the full guide, which is linked there within the slides. And so that goal for the skill development is that students are engaging in teacher-directed applications of what they're learning. And you begin to see with the competencies, again, scaffolding on those orientation competencies, that there's a reinforcement of safety really being key. As you talk to employers, as you look at this work, students need to be able to address the awareness of safety issues, both on the overall shop floor and for the personal protection as well. And that they're able to begin to build in and learn those basic concepts within the field. And the goal would be as well that students are continuing those work-based learning opportunities with site visits, and they're beginning to get exposures to team-based challenges, such as robotics teams or Skills USA, that are helping them to apply that learning that they're having in Capstone. And we also began to identify within these courses, thinking about how do you build in the industry certifications early on. So we, again, tying to that safety need, making sure that OSHA 10-hour course completion certificate is incorporated at that skill development level. And we worked really hard with our competencies to make sure that these were demonstrated as being aligned to either the MSSC or the NEM. So not suggesting that there's one over the other, but actually there's a lot of alignment between those industry certifications when you begin to break them down. So the goal would be, again, at that skill development level, students are beginning to get at those MSSC, those first 2 credentials for safety or the quality practices and measurement, or for those NEMs, it's those entry-level NEMs certifications that they're building on. And then at the capstone level, again, that goal statement is around students are self-directed in their production applications. So they're actually able to use their understanding of the manufacturing processes, and they're able to, with minimal supervision, to be able to plan and calculate and either machine a part, if they're kind of doing work aligned to NEMs, or to support the development of a product through a production system if you're more aligned to those MSSC processes. And that's kind of starting to capture in a lot of these broader competencies within this course. And the students are beginning to get exposure to competencies around supply chain logistics, around digital manufacturing tools and robotics automation, that they're also getting exposure to quality control principles and maintenance principles, and leading by the time of high school graduation to ideally students having that certified production technician for MSSC, or those NIMS level 1 turning the operations and the no operations certifications if they're more aligned to the NIMS certifications. So again, those were that's a quick overview of the rundown that's in the guide. There's descriptions of, for all of those different elements that are laid out, but I'm now really excited to turn it over to our colleagues at Rock Valley, who will start to show how those model programs of study are playing out within their region. So Kara and team, I'll turn it over to you. And Kara, you're still muted.
Thank you. You'd think we'd learn by now. But anyways, I just want to say thank you to your team for inviting us to participate. I am Kara Schultz, Dean of Early College at Rock Valley, and I have the wonderful Denise with me. I'll let her introduce herself.
Hi, my name is Denise Anderson. I am a professor of engineering technology at Rock Valley. I'm also the academic chair of the department.
Oh, and we want to say too, feel free to ask questions in the chat or in the Q&A as we go throughout. And so we kind of, I think we missed one slide in there. Oh, well, anyways, where we started, I don't know where that one slide went, but yeah, the where we started is missing. But anyways, where we started, I can at least go from memory. In 2017, we were given a grant through our RVC Foundation to explore pathways on our end, and we hired a full-time person to start mapping these out with our departments and industry partners. And one of the resulting pieces of that is actually our own regional pathway that we had come up with during that time. So we were able to implement that starting fall of 19. Some other things we've done previous to this, because Rockford's a really large manufacturing hub in the state, is we were working with the industry partners on like bridge building competitions. We also had a summer bridge program that started in 2012, where we've been able to allow high school students onto our campus over the summer between junior and senior years, and as well as after senior year, to come and participate and earn those college credits while they haven't been able to access them while they are at their high school. So you'll see we circled the MET 106 because that was a course that was originally identified as a good dual credit opportunity. And we've kind of learned along the way that that was not very feasible for our high school partners. And in working with Denise and her team to reassess kind of where we were, that became very apparent that that wasn't the best fit. So you'll see kind of down the road in some of our slides what we've ended up with. And then we also came up with mechatronics. And so we do have a high school in our district that has just launched mechatronics because the intent was fall of 2020. And we all know what should be unnamed got in the way of that. And so we do have mechatronics, and that is part of our Advanced Technology Center offerings coming soon.
So kind of where we are right now is we have several articulation agreements with area high schools for Project Lead the Way, where the agreement allows students to qualify for credit for our EGR 101, or Introduction to Engineering course. We've offered this program since 2019, and we've increased the number of high schools that can qualify for this credit. We also have several districts that are exploring our MET 110 class, which is our first manufacturing processes course. They're looking to implement it during the next school year. It was implemented at an alternative high school campus that we have in our area. That was implemented in 2019. And then we're also partnering with our local EFE to develop dual credit boot camps. We've hosted a couple of those so far to offer instruction for high school teachers who want to offer those dual credit classes and provide professional development for them. The focus area of a dual credit boot camp I hosted a couple summers ago focused on the areas of SolidWorks, which is a very common computer aided design course our drafting program, and then also making sure high school teachers understand the importance of industry drafting standards.
And some other things we're doing as well is working to expand the interest in manufacturing with our other districts and offering them those bridge programs if acquiring materials and large machinery is not within their budgets. But we also have a newly hired bridge coordinator position where we will work to bridge the gap over the summers or help students kind of pick up the remaining credits from sort of like a first semester that they should have complete before they enroll in kind of like that year 2 to really help them get a head start.
Hi, Cara and Denise. I'm going to pause you for a moment because we
Yes.
have a question in the Q&A. And the question is, did you say you have a full-time position mapping these POS approvals out of Rock Valley? If yes, is it grant funded?
Yes, we did. And it technically was grant funded through our own foundation. And then after that, kind of the other part that I missed is that we then moved into a partnership with the Community Foundation of Northern Illinois, and we got another grant called Linking Talent with Opportunity, which we shared with Highland Community College to develop and implement those pathways then. So yes, it kind of started where someone was able to really truly map this out and work with the academic departments to identify what was the most feasible in theory. And the implementation came through with the CFNIL grant. So some challenges that we've, manufacturing is not the easiest thing to implement across the board. And so some of the challenges would be equipment costs for the schools. Again, as I mentioned before, the originally identified pathways courses were not necessarily practical for implementation, specifically the metrology course. And then the other piece of that is we're currently offering MET 100, which is our introductory CAD and print reading course for articulated credit. And we don't have the best tracking measures in place for articulated course rosters. So that's something we are trying to automate as much as possible, but automated in our system is technically code for a manual process, but automated for the students from their perspective.
So some challenges we've had more on the faculty side, I already alluded to the fact that through the high school boot camps that we recognize that some high school instructors, while they may have shops that they're very familiar with within their own high school, a general lack of familiarity and use of SolidWorks at the high school level has been one challenge we need to work through. And then also making sure that the high schools understand drafting standards so that the students creating these projects in SolidWorks are working to standards that are going to be recognized in industry. In the Rockford region, we've kind of seen a renaissance of manufacturers that are trying to update their skills for the new economy coming down the road. So there's been a lot of fast-paced industry changes. Our industry partners are talking about needs for automation, needs for 3D printing and additive manufacturing, and then also software changes. Just this semester, we're starting to introduce MATLAB to our students in the Introduction to Engineering coursework to help prepare them for future coursework at the university level, as well as once they get into the workforce. We also have recognized that it's time for us to take a look at our programming. So we're going through and making some programming updates. We're currently in the idea stage, trying to figure out what we think our industry partners need for the future and how that's going to affect the curriculum that we have. And then we also recognize that there needs to be a better post-secondary to secondary faculty connection. So we need to be working with our high school partners as faculty at the college level to make sure that our students understand what's going to be expected of them in college and come to college prepared. And then another issue we've had is we've had some turnover at the college and leadership and faculty. And as a result of that, our manufacturing advisory committee kind of fell dormant over the past couple of years. So we've got the challenge of trying to reinvigorate and reinvent that going forward.
So along with challenges come their successes as well. And so I'm going to let Denise talk a little bit about this part because she's got some really exciting news to share about our partnership with the EFE, especially just this week. So I'll let her take on that. Oh, you're muted.
Yeah, one of the challenges that we are faced with is we have to reestablish this advisory committee. And just this past week, we reached out to our local EFE called Cianci, and we're starting to establish that community partnership with them. We are hoping to host a built model advisory board where we look at the knowledge, skills, and abilities that our students need in our various engineering and technology programs, and to help utilize some of the same industry partners so that when we need to reach out to industry partners for ideas about curriculum design and for issues like internships, field trips, co-op experiences, things like that, that we're not going to the same well multiple times by multiple organizations. So if we can, we're hoping to host dual advisory committee meetings where we can split the meeting between the needs at the high school and the college level. And then obviously this will also provide a connection point by establishing this this relationship with our EFE. We can get that connection point between secondary and post-secondary faculty. We're also partnering with our early college office headed by Cara here and within the academic department. And we're looking at the program of study for dual credit purposes, trying to figure out exactly what those classes look like. And we'll talk a little bit more about that. And then as we've talked about in the past, we've hosted some of these boot camps. The feedback that we got from the boot camp that I hosted is that it was very valuable to the high school teachers, being able to understand exactly what the expectations are going to be at the college level. So doing that through the collaboration with the early college office, our academic department, and the EFE, we're hoping to build models to continue those boot camps in the future to try to help the high school faculty know exactly what's going on as curriculum changes at the college level, provide that professional development, and then also help analyze assessment data going forward to make sure that we're holding students to the same expectations at the high school and college levels.
Yep. And this EFE partnership has really taken off. We've worked with them for several years, but it's been sort of on and off as far as how tight knit the relationship is. But we've reconnected over the past year, and we made sure that our Perkins coordinator has also been involved with connecting with them, because really the CLNA and the programs of study, a lot of that is very identical now and aligned, which is very helpful. So I'd encourage other schools to do that. And the EFE was willing, as professional development for their own secondary faculty, to pay stipends to our RBC professors for these boot camps. And so, you know, they were paid some time to prep and then also teach and lead that portion. And we typically do that over the summer months, kind of immediately following the school year. So the other success is that some of these districts that we're working with have been able to allocate their own funds as well as seek Perkins funding for the equipment purchases. And that has worked out well for a couple of our larger districts that are partnering with us. And then the summer manufacturing and engineering bridge programs that were initially launched in 2012, they're technically called manufacturing and engineering academies. We did reintroduce them again last year. We didn't have as great of participation as we would have liked, but I think that was likely due to COVID. And in the past, they had been very well attended, but we tend to get them like internship opportunities, exposure to different industry partners, some advising. So the manufacturing one is set up so they would actually do our manufacturing engineering tech program after senior year of high school. The engineering one is set up so that between junior senior year, a student could start their pre-engineering coursework and then continue on in dual credit senior year to hopefully knock out a semester of pre-engineering coursework. And then we worked with John. I didn't realize this was the baby, but yes. So we worked with John really closely in developing our own version for Rock Valley College. that reflects our actual course titles and numbers, so that, you know, eventually we can use this with our partners to share and as we go out and meet with the other districts. But we've talked about other ways too to get students coursework for those students that can't get to our campus necessarily, or sorry, that can't get access on their own campus at the dual credit for these manufacturing courses. So, you know, that's where the summer bridge comes in. Other students can come here for dual enrollment during the semester as well, or any portions of these classes that are online. A lot of our high schools have started to set up sort of like virtual learning centers within their high school and enrolling their students in online asynchronous coursework. So this kind of lays out what we ended up, what Denise advised us to do is to aim for the capstone of our graphic SolidWorks CAD 1 course instead of metrology. So that seems much more accessible. We can help those students get their certified SolidWorks associate certification out of that, as well as help the instructors that would be teaching that course get that certification in order to become qualified as well, in addition to their hours and their degrees.
Yeah, just a couple of things that I'd add on this. I thought it was really creative thinking about using the summer bridge for metrology, just, you know, being with the understanding that high schools couldn't really have the equipment they would need for that course on campus. But if you begin to think about that as a summer bridge after graduation, that can help get them through that basic certificate. And also, Kara and Denise, can you speak a little bit? I know that oftentimes high schools might be working with AutoCAD or other graphing tools, maybe how you're thinking about kind of supporting access to SolidWorks for any of your high school partners, or any strategies you're starting to see emerge from any of your districts around that.
I'll let Denise take that one.
I do know that our EFE has offered to help the high school districts with funding opportunities through Perkins if they need support for the SolidWorks. We have also, we're willing to think about other software packages that might be, you know, acceptable to use instead of SolidWorks. Right now, SolidWorks is the main focus that we have at the college. I am hoping that using the advisory committee that we can get a better understanding of exactly what CAD software is being used by our area manufacturers, to make sure that, you know, we're acknowledging their needs in our course offerings. At the college itself, we do offer SolidWorks. That is our most popular CAD program, but we also teach an AutoCAD course as well at the college, and it's used a lot by our tool and die apprenticeship program.
So what is next? Launching master course templates in our Canvas. And we have a Center for Instructional Design, Teaching and Innovation on our campus. So there's a team of, I think, 4 that work primarily with our Canvas LMS and some like professional development for faculty and things. And so they've helped us set up these dual credit hubs to collect resource information and give access to our dual credit faculty once they're in the Rock Valley College system, so they can have access to curriculum, sample tests, sample syllabi, that kind of thing, to give them a snapshot picture. That's still in process, and I'll let Denise kind of talk about her version of that, even potentially for the department itself.
Right. Yeah. With the same city team that we have on campus, just recently I've started working with them on trying to develop a master course template that we can use in our department to be able to give our students the same kind of look and feel to our online coursework through Canvas. And we're going to basically build these templates out. It's something that we can use as a training resource for our own adjunct faculty, and then also make some resources, say like from a publisher, available to the high school faculty as well.
And so we'd really like to move forward with fully implementing these. So we're at a point where we've got the manufacturing or MET 100 fully implemented as articulated credit, and we're getting to schools that are ready to almost implement the manufacturing processes one. Is that correct, Denise? I always forget the course titles, but as well as our manufacturing or mechatronics pathway. And then engineering wasn't kind of focused on ours, but we do have a good engineering focus here at the college as well. And we've got a great partnership in place with NIU that actually offers a couple of their bachelor degrees, allowing students to stay in the Rockford area on our campus to finish those. And then also exploring the integration of transitional STEM math into the pathway. So right now, all of our high school partners have only implemented the QL stats class so far for transitional. We'd like to encourage them to do STEM because it would definitely be a benefit to this pathway in particular. And then working with the department on seeking out opportunities for work-based learning initiatives and supporting that on the secondary side. So actually later this week, I will be presenting a quality component 3 for the Perkins program of study alongside our Perkins coordinator to kind of help think through some different ideas that can be implemented within the program of study for our departments going through that process right now. And then Denise, I think this next point is yours.
Yeah, it just, as a department, we are still establishing the processes and best practices on looking at both program and course assessment and using that data to drive to our curriculum plans. We've also had conversations at the high level of how can we partner with our area high schools to make sure that we're holding our students to the same expectations. We've had some anecdotal information where students who took some of the initial coursework at the high school level, when they come to the college and they're ready for the next level, this is in particular with the mechatronics program, that we have observed a difference between what a student would learn on RVC's campus versus what they were exposed to at the high school level. So just trying to focus on assessment and professional development to make sure that we're all holding the students to the same expectations.
And then I'll jump in with that last point. We provided our email addresses. I think both Denise and I are open to partnering across institutions. So we could enter them in the chat too if you want, but you're more than welcome to reach out. Secondary EFE, we can connect and network as much as possible. But I think any of you that have maybe looked into the manufacturing pathway and have some of your own ideas, those are things that we would welcome for ideas as well.
Absolutely.
I want to give a special thank you to Cara and Denise. The information that you gave us is definitely amazing, and we definitely appreciate all of the great work that you all are doing at Rock Valley College.
Thank you.
So as we get ready to conclude our presentation, a couple of things that I wanted to do is to provide some space for us to just really take a step back and reflect on what we just heard today. And so I want us to kind of use the chat function as a way to kind of, document something that is, circling in your mind. If there's a question that you have that you want to get answered, drop it in the chat, or a thought or concept that squares your thinking, and then maybe a few takeaways that you have that you'd like to share with the group. So I'm going to pause. If you could drop that in the chat, that would be greatly appreciated. And so if you have a smartphone available, if you want to turn on the picture taking function and kind of scroll over here, this QR code, it gives you direct access to our survey that we would love for you to complete. We're going to send this out to you in a follow-up email as well, as long as in addition to the slide deck and the recording for this too. But if you have a moment right now, please go ahead and complete the survey. The link is at the bottom as well. But if you have a smartphone, go ahead and link that. And so some of the questions in this survey is about the model program of study itself. If you have an interest in the advisory committee, or if you want to assess the effectiveness of the committee, you have opportunity to do that. And then we want to know about this webinar, right? Like, what were some key takeaways for you, some things that you'd like to share, other items that will be helpful for us as we are pushing along in this process. So again, if you didn't get a chance to get the link, you will get that in an email here shortly. Other next steps we have for you, again, as stated earlier, these are the other webinars that we have upcoming. We invite you all to register for these. This information will also be linked in the follow-up email that you'll get to. Again, we're looking for volunteers to be on our advisory committee. We are launching new guides in human and public service, non-education, and then hospitality, culinary, and culinary tourism. If you want to join in on all that fun, let us know, and we will definitely include you.
Just a special note on the time commitment, being in the advisory committee. It's approximately 3 meetings of about an hour and a half long, spread out a month apart. And then there's the option for a sub-working group that is stipended to be a part of the advisory committee. And that's pretty much it. So it's about, what is that, 4.5 hours over a 3-month period. And then further opportunities would be stipended as well. So even if yourself or a colleague at your college or even in the high school space who you feel has like really deep knowledge around this, we would welcome them participating as well.
Thanks for that one, Jose.
And then I just want to make another plug for those of you kind of at the community college space who are implementing not only course sequences, but are now looking to implement work-based learning and integrated work-based learning opportunities into your program of study. I want to make a pitch to join our Illinois Work-Based Learning Innovation Network, hosted by my colleague, Heather Penzak. She has a very robust resource hub, very kind of a monthly newsletter that comes out, and also like a monthly webinar series. As a matter of fact, our monthly webinar series in work-based learning parallels kind of our webinar series in the curricular aspects of the program of study. So while we are doing a manufacturing and engineering program of study now, her kind of next or just previous work-based learning network meeting was around manufacturing as well. So we're paralleling and kind of going cohesively, but I really invite you all I know in the program of study space now, at the post-secondary level, you're required to implement the team-based challenge. What does that look like? What is the definition of that? How would I do that well? This resource hub will have some opportunities for you to kind of learn that more deeply.
So that concludes our webinar. Again, we thank you all so much for joining us. Look out for a follow-up email that you will get from us with lots of great information about the survey. You'll get this recording, the slide deck, and then also how to join our next upcoming webinar sessions. We're going to hang back for a few minutes. So if you have questions or lasting thoughts, we'll be here to kind of help you through that process.
Thanks again, Kara and Denise. Really great information. Appreciate it.